Good afternoon. Welcome to our presentation today called Think Like a Journalist, Arrested on the Job, a conversation with Andrea Sahouri. My name is Julie Rosa, and I am the First Amendment Specialist at the Greenlee School of Journalism and Communication. Today's event is part of our annual week-long First Amendment Days celebration. This is our 19th year of educating and celebrating the 5 freedoms of the First. And those freedoms are the freedom of speech, press, petition, assembly, and religion. Our theme this year is Some Assembly Required, with a focus on protest. So let me tell you why this session is so relevant to our theme. Des Moines Register reporter Andrea Sahouri was covering a Black Lives Matter protest last year when she was pepper sprayed in the face and arrested by a Des Moines police officer. Sahouri and others made it clear that she was a journalist, but prosecutors refused to drop the charges. Today, Sahouri will share her harrowing story, talk about the importance of a free press, and answer your questions. I'm proud to hand it over to ISU student Amber Mohmand, an intern at the Des Moines Register and a former reporter at the Iowa State Daily. Amber was a student in my class, and I am so thankful that she's here today to get us started. So Amber, take it away.
Hi, I'm Amber. Gonna start this right now. Andrea is my mentor and teaching me a lot, and I'm learning a lot from her. So that's fun. But let's talk about on May 31st. That was the day you were covering a protest, I believe. Can you tell me what was going on at that time? What day? I don't know if it was day 3 of the protests in Iowa.
Yeah. So I had been covering that whole weekend. Protests in Des Moines started after the killing of George Floyd on May 29th. That's the first protest that happened in Des Moines. And, from the first night, there was tear gas, pepper spray, definitely heightened escalation between police and protesters. And by that third day, there were protests basically all day. Multiple different people are trying to organize something. March, I believe, if I remember correctly, yes, it started at Evelyn K. Davis Park. And then right after, I had met up with another journalist, Des Moines Register journalist, at the Target in Merle Hay Mall. I don't know if any of you guys know what Merle Hay Mall is in Des Moines, but it's a very, very busy commercial area, commercial intersection. The intersection of Douglas and Merle Hay Road is extremely busy, especially on a summer evening around 6 p.m. 6:30 p.m. when I arrived to meet up, so this other journalist wouldn't be there alone. And, hundreds of people started showing up. And immediately when I got there, it was right before 6:30. I noticed that the crowd was extremely diverse and also extremely young. I had felt that it was probably majority high school students, maybe younger, maybe a little older. Some people were a little older, you could tell. But yes, the majority was young and very diverse. And when I first got there, I saw protesters on the side of the street holding up signs, very peaceful. And eventually they went into the middle of the street for a short period of time and held their signs to block the Merle Hay and Douglas intersection. And that's when things escalated. Eventually police in riot gear showed up, pushing protesters who were kind of at the street or in the across the street at a strip mall into the Merle Hay Mall parking lot / Target parking lot, we call it, because there's a Target there, and started using heavy tear gas on the crowd. And this is very much an abbreviated version of the story, so feel free to ask questions as well. But
and that was when police started showing up?
Yeah, so police were there, police were already there, not as many, but the police in riot gear came at around 7:11. So I had been there not even an hour. And, you know, the police in riot gear came through an alleyway by, I call it the Wingstop Plaza. If anyone knows the area, and they kind of came, I think, from the back, but I'm not sure, but that's kind of how it appeared. And there is, you know, at least a dozen of them lined up. Again, they pushed people, you know, through that parking lot into the Merle Hay parking lot. And I was there documenting with another Register reporter. We were both live tweeting because so many things were happening that day. Kind of the method that we used was, okay, live tweet. So, you know, editors can see what's going on and put it into a live blog that was published in the Register. And we would link to the tweets. Sorry?
What does the communication look like between reporters and editors and just live tweeting in general?
Yeah, so it was Wi-Fi was very hard to get through because there were so many people, but basically it would be like also in a group chat with your editors, kind of informing them what's going on, as well as they're monitoring your live tweets, or another reporter is monitoring your live tweets, and they're able to, you know, put that in the blog if they need clarification. You know, they would text us and whatnot, but that was kind of the mode that we were in. And so once they moved the group of protesters from the Wingstop side to the Merle Hay Mall side, because people are going back and forth a lot, but they started using tear gas and then looting, you know, and then a group of protesters started looting the shoe carnival is the first that I saw, and then into the Target and other in other stores. It wasn't massive looting from what I could tell, but it was some looting. And that's when things, you know, even another layer of escalation, right? I started seeing armored vehicles enter the Merle Hay Mall parking lot. More tear gas was being used. So, you know, me and this other Register reporter were trying to, okay, let's get away, because I was documenting the looting, and, you know, more police were coming. So we're like, okay, let's try to get away. And then as we're, you know, trying to move away from the looting and whatnot, more tear gas was used, and basically it forced us to move into the street, which again is a very busy intersection. I mean, there was so many cars. I remember thinking I was going to get hit by a car. And in daylight, by the way, this is broad daylight. This is all happening. And we move across Douglas Avenue into another strip mall that I call the Verizon strip mall, just to, you know, make it a little bit more easy to understand where I was. So we move across there. We're getting away from the tear gas. Projectiles start getting utilized onto protesters. And we're getting away, and I round the corner. We all round the corner from the Verizon business. And I remember, okay, you know, thinking I'm okay, I got away, I'm safe. I look behind me, and all of a sudden I see an officer charging right at me. The other registered reporters in front of me. And so immediately my initial thoughts were kind of, okay, don't run from police, comply, tell them who you are. So I put up my hands, I say I'm press. The officer, you know, grabbed me instead, pepper sprayed me right in the face at close range, and said, that's not what I asked. And that's not something you forget at all.
For sure.
And yeah, so.
Who was that officer? Do you know?
What?
Who was the officer?
Yeah, the officer was Officer Luke Wilson of the Des Moines Police Department.
And was he trained for crowd control or things like that? Or what was his like?
I think, no, the Des Moines Police Department didn't have a formal crowd control policy. But what we did reveal and during trial was it is policy to have your body camera on. And if you don't record something, the cameras have the ability to capture video after the fact. And he did not let it tell a supervisor is that as well, that he failed to record this, and that, you know, there had to be footage that could be captured in time. So that was 2 violations of Des Moines Police Department policy. And that's why we don't have his body camera footage. But we have others from, you know, officers at the scene, and then officers who had come around the corner moments after my arrest. And so, you know, I was put in zip ties, and I was, you know, put in a police van. And I actually went live in the back of the police van because I was kind of still in reporter mode. Couldn't believe that this was happening to me and, you know, to others around me. And, um, you know, I just needed to let people know what was happening, especially like editors, my mom, my dad, you know, everyone that needed to know like what was going on. And so, yeah, and then I was booked in, you know, Polk County Jail for a bit. I had to shower because I had pepper spray all over my body. I had to shower in jail. And then, yeah, that's kind of.
And how long was that like process, and how long did you have to like wait until you got water for your eyes and you were pepper sprayed, if you could remember?
The arresting office, the officers like that were like immediately there that arrested me, didn't have water, but then when the van came, I think that's when water was brought. And but at that time I was kind of like I was already you know, handcuffed in zip ties behind my back. I'm pleading for water, pleading, my eyes were in excruciating pain. And the water made it worse, but in, you know, in a good way, that it needs to flush out the pepper spray. But it took a bit to get that flushed.
This is a question from the audience, but what was your relationship like with the police before this? And had you been a cops reporter, and did you know any of the officers there? Did you know Wilson before this?
No, I did not know. I only really know a few, and then, you know, the PIO. You know, throughout the whole ordeal, we've all remained professional. Well, most times I would say, and I remained professional before and after. I was a cops reporter when I was arrested. And I remember during my arrest, I was trying to name drop officers, you know, because I kept repeating that I'm a journalist over and over and over and over again. And there are body camera from another officer that shows my arresting officer saying, "Don't come back."
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, it was pretty clear that they knew I was a journalist and they didn't really care. But even after, I mean, obviously my arrest made things a little awkward, but I think that, you know, maintaining professionalism is important. So.
And well, we kind of see this like threat to journalism now too, even with the Brooklyn Center arrests, how people are just telling reporters that they're going to get arrested. What are your thoughts on that and that threat to journalism in general?
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's actually really terrifying. I mean, I think it's all types of kind of mass arrests can be terrifying for a community, whether that's journalists or protesters, you know, and terrifying for First Amendment rights. You know, it seems to, you know, that any kind of assembly seems to almost be immediately unlawful. And that's kind of scary because people are angry about what's going on in their communities and they have a right to be angry. Obviously, you know, violence is another thing, but, you know, from what I witnessed, you know, in Des Moines specifically, it would be maybe a few throwing rocks and maybe water bottles and sometimes bricks and whatnot. But, you know, the majority are just people trying to, you know, engage in free speech and show that, you know, they're in pain, that they, you know, are trying to speak out against, you know, racism and whatnot. I think that I'm not going to be the last journalist arrested. I already haven't been. I mean, in LA, there were protests against the evacuation of an unhoused camp, an unhoused population camp, and there were over 20 journalists that were either arrested or detained. And even many of those journalists actually had police issued press badges. I mean, and, you know, to hear Brooklyn Center police saying, you know, explicitly saying journalists leave the area, you will get arrested, is scary because we're there to document what protesters are doing, and we're there to document what police are doing. Going down the street is not documenting the news. It's not holding people accountable. And that's going into very much uncharted territory. Not uncharted, that's actually the wrong word I meant to say. I meant to say dangerous territory. I don't think it's uncharted in the sense where, you know, the United States maybe doesn't jail as many journalists as other countries, but it doesn't mean that doesn't happen. But I think we're going to see an escalation. We already have, and I think that's going to continue.
For sure. I have two questions. They both stem in different directions. So I'll start with one and then I'll find my way back to the other. But one of them is, do you feel like, I don't know if this is wording it correctly, but do you feel like police officers do you feel like journalists should feel obligated to tell like the PIO officer that that they're coming to the protests, or should they just show up and just do their jobs? Like, how do you
I mean, I think that just the journalist comfortability, but to be honest, I don't see a reason in the sense where I don't let police officers dictate how I report on police conduct and protester conduct, and you know, at a you know, because I think that we're gonna know what a PIO might say, you know, you have to stay here or you have to stay here, but at the end of the day, it's a chaotic situation, and I'm gonna be at places, and I'm gonna talk to people, and I'm gonna do what I need to do to report an accurate and fair and balanced story. And when I say balance, I mean as well acknowledging power structures and providing context. And you don't get that if you are, you know, right there, right? And I think that's honestly a little bit ridiculous for, you know, I think if you talk to most reporters, they would say, no, we're not going to do that, right? So I think it's just comfortability. I mean, for instance, during my trial, they tried to argue that I was there unlawfully.
Yeah.
But then they used local television footage of you know, of reporters from local TV right next to me to say I was unlawfully there. So it wasn't even like I was in crazy areas. I mean, I was majority of the time right next to TV as well.
And when you were arrested and in the back of the car or in the van, did you think the charges would be dropped, or did you think it would like go to trial at that time?
No, I didn't think that I would be going to trial. I thought that, you know, there'd be a little bit more respect for journalism and understanding that, you know, she wasn't there to protest, she was there to do her job, but that did not happen.
And during the trial, did you feel like people were I when I watched the trial, I saw that they were trying to argue that you were part of the protest instead of covering the protest. Did you feel that like I guess your capabilities as a reporter were compromised during that trial, if that makes sense, or like your credibility?
Well, actually, they weren't technically allowed to say I was part of the protest. What they were kind of insinuating was that, yeah, okay, I wasn't participating, but I was still there unlawfully. And but what happened is the Polk County attorney actually said after I was found not guilty that I was there to protest. But that's, you know, we kind of already saw that coming just based on preliminary trial things. Is they were trying to say basically that I'm a sympathizer, that I'm biased, and that I was there to protest. And I think that it's easier for maybe entities to argue that for a woman of color that's on the scene. Oh yeah, she was of course there to protest, right? She's of course an activist, but you know, so that's that. Can you repeat the second part of your question again?
I guess it was just like, did you feel like your credibility within the community was compromised during the trial? Like your thoughts about
Oh yeah, absolutely not. You know, I think that my reporting shows that I, you know, give the voice to Iowans. I, you know, reach out to to all sides of the story. And I mean, if one side doesn't want to comment, you know, I tried, right? So But I don't think so. If anything, I think a lot of the community trusts me more and sees the, work that I've been doing. But something that people don't realize is that, journalists of color are actually even more careful to be seen as not biased, because we don't necessarily get that white centric,
Yeah.
apparently inherent objectivity for neutral objectivity for being a white individual. So journalists of color really have that burden of feeling like, oh, will I be seen as biased because of my identity, right? And I think that that's a little bit that's not a little bit, that's very unfair. And so when when I'm reporting on these issues in these protests, I'm keeping my identity in mind, in the sense where I'm able to connect with other people in different ways, but at the same time, I'm really striving to get all sides of the story. And again, acknowledging power structures, getting context, being fair, letting people respond, and so forth. So
For sure. I see the question from the audience. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll ask the question from the audience. Do you think you would have been treated differently if you do you think your white counterpart reporter would have been treated differently if they were in your shoes and you were in theirs? If that makes sense, if the roles were reversed and it was the white reporter that was getting arrested.
I don't know. You never know, because that didn't happen, right? But I think it says a lot that I was the only reporter arrested, and the reporter next to me, she's an amazing, I love her. She's an amazing human being. She did not deserve to get arrested either, but she also, she was next to me and saying to the officer, she's a journalist, saying that I'm a journalist, that she's a journalist, that we are journalists for the Des Moines Register, and they were just like, okay, you can go. And then I don't know why I was not allowed to go, right? So we were dressed both basically the same, casual clothes. This was a protest. We weren't allowed to wear business suits or anything. So I can't really tell you what would happen, but I think what did happen says a lot.
And then a question from the audience was, after the arrest, did you question whether or not you wanted to continue working as a journalist?
Not at all, actually. If anything, it heightened my motivation to keep doing, important work for the community, and to really just, grow as a journalist. I think what was frustrating was, the trial and everything kind of impeding on my personal life and my professional life, in the sense where, it felt, there were days where I couldn't get out of bed because I was anxious. It's a traumatic experience, right? And I didn't like that, because as someone who really values the work of journalism, I just wanted to keep going, keep on the ground, rolling with work. And sometimes that just wasn't the case. I wasn't mentally, I needed to take some time, right? But I did end up covering majority of the protests throughout the summer. If I had to guess, I would probably say like 95. So I was really thankful that, even my editors in the Des Moines Register, supported me in that sense and said, hey, she didn't ask to get arrested. We're not going to change her job. She does her job well, and she's going to continue doing so. So
for sure. And when you were acquitted, what was that like feeling that you had when you found, like, when the jury made their decision?
I was very relieved. I was very ready, one, to say my story, my side of the story, when I testified. And then I was just so relieved to not have this, kind of plaguing my life in a sense. And it just made me feel like this was all worth it. The fight was worth it. I continued to fight because I recognized how important this case was for all First Amendment rights, not just of journalists, but of protesters, and just people trying to speak, utilize the freedom of their speech. And I really fought for that, and I had a lot of support, literally from all over the world, which was awesome. And yeah, it just made me feel like it was all worth it in the end. So
Did you expect this trial to get like so much attention from the world essentially?
No. No. I mean, part of what was crazy is I was a little bit naive. You know, I went to grad school for journalism and we had talked about arrests of journalists and attacks on journalists, but I was very naive to think that that would not happen to me in Iowa.
Mhm.
You know, it's not as populous of a state. Um, you know, just thinking, yeah, like this won't happen to me, right? I mean, but it did, and I was very naive to think that maybe it wouldn't. And so I really didn't think that it would get a lot of attention, also because, you know, I'm a young reporter. I'm not, you know, a national reporter for the New York Times or whatever, but I was um I was happy that I was happy to see really the world stand up for freedom of the press and First Amendment rights. So
And do you think this like acquittal, you know what I'm talking about? Do you feel like this paves the path for protesters who got arrested last summer as well, if you're able to talk on that?
I hope so, in a sense where, you know, for instance, there was a stipulation in my trial that, you know, talked about the issues of body cam, that actually, if your camera is on, you can retrieve evidence even after the fact if you didn't preserve the video, right? You can get it in time as long as you tell a supervisor. So I think that's going to be really important for other cases.
Mhm.
And I also think it just revealed that the Polk County Attorney's Office, you know, is willing in many instances to take cases to trial with barely any evidence, and you know, take simple misdemeanors to trial, which are low level offenses, and um, you know, on very little evidence. And I should clarify, I was charged with interference of official acts and failure to disperse.
Mm. And this is a question from the audience, but what was your experience on your social media following your arrest? And did you have to take measures to protect yourself and your privacy?
Yeah, social media definitely blew up for me. I'm not like the best on Twitter, so my friends joke that now I have to be funny, and I have all these followers. But I am funny, just not on, you know, Twitter. But other, you know, the privacy, I am still working on that. I'm definitely very fearful for my privacy. I'm a little bit paranoid now. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, I just recently, and I would recommend this to all, you know, journalists. I recently, unfortunately, you have to pay money, but subscribe to the service that deletes basically personal information from the internet, because a lot of data brokers will buy and sell your name, address, relative, phone numbers to other data broker companies, and then they're on this like databases. And so if you Google your name, you'll see them, right?
Yeah.
And so I paid to have that removed. And I mean, I think like they do like an initial report in like 6 or whatever, maybe like a week or a couple weeks, and I had like hundreds of documents already, or hundreds of addresses and numbers and names and whatever already removed. So that was it was nice, but I'm still working on more privacy issues. So if anyone has good recommendations on how to secure your phone and your laptop, that's appreciated, because those are things I'm starting to take way more seriously.
Mhm.
I think everyone should too.
Sure. And this is from Julie, but it took many months to get this to trial. Did you think that the charges would get dropped, or did they ever come close to realizing that this situation shouldn't go to trial at all?
I don't know if they realize that it shouldn't go to trial, but they certainly took me to trial, for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Know. But I did think it would get dropped, I think in the initial months, but by the end of summer, by really like actually fall and then like getting into winter, I was like, no way.
Yeah.
I think by fall, I was just like, no. they're not gonna, they're not gonna drop it. So I was supposed to actually have my trial in December, but it moved because of coronavirus. So yeah, so I kind of just had this feeling like, especially once they set a trial date,
Mhm.
I was just like, yeah, we're going to trial. So.
And, with the trial like looming over your head and on top of your other just normal day-to-day duties and stories and stuff like that, did you ever feel like you like feel that feeling of burnout? And like if you did, how did you like combat it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I had a lot of burnout, and sometimes I still do, but it's been getting better. Um, like I said earlier, I think there have been days where I just have not been really able to get out of bed, or even just like little things just would make me really anxious. And
Mhm.
it's kind of like victim blaming, right? Where you start to feel like maybe it's your fault that you got arrested and assaulted and, and so forth. But then I was like, okay, no, I did nothing wrong, right?
Mhm.
And that was difficult. But again, I think the support from the Des Moines community, Iowa in general, well, Iowa communities, I should say, the World, Amnesty, Gannett, Des Moines Register, etc. Right? Really got me through those days.
Mhm. And
How I combated that was really just making sure I was taking like time for myself and just being generous with myself and allowing myself to say, hey, it's okay to feel these things, but take time.
for sure. And then are there things journalism schools need to do to help future students who might run into challenges with um, price or other sources?
I think more so. It depends because I don't know what all different journalism schools do. I know that we definitely talked about these issues, but then, like I said, I didn't necessarily think that it would happen to me this early in my career. Not that it would never happen, but again, in Iowa and within my first year as a reporter, definitely did not think that would happen to me. What I think that is super important to highlight is the fact that there are freelance journalists and other like maybe other community-based journalists who don't have the same protections I did, in a sense where I was able to have, Gannett, a huge company,
Yeah.
fund my legal defense, and a very great legal defense. And I can imagine journalists without that protection feeling very overwhelmed. And, I would like to see more support for, those kind of journalists.
And Julie is asking, where did you go to J school, like journalism school? And were you part of the student newspaper in college, or like how did you
Yeah.
do that?
So actually I did undergrad at the University of Michigan. I'm from Michigan, born and raised. I didn't actually pick journalism until my senior year. So I didn't do the school newspaper or anything like that, but I was always good at reading and writing. And then my major was very interdisciplinary, where in a sense where I was learning about a lot of different topics and very curious in nature. So I checked out a journalism school, Columbia Journalism in New York, and I really like how they advertise for people who don't have experience or having a career change. So I applied, and turns out they really liked my application and got in, and it worked out. Had to figure out a few things, but it worked out. And I went there right after grad school, and that was kind of my entry into journalism, actually. So it's really cool to see, I have a different perspective on student journalism. I almost wish that I did that, but
Yeah.
obviously my path was different. So
And a lot of student journalists, including myself, look up to you. So, do you have any advice for student journalists now, and how just any advice for them in general about what they can do right now?
yeah, for instance, I think the biggest advice I have is I know that what happened to me is really scary, and I know that what we're seeing, the attacks on journalists, threat against journalists is really scary. But don't. My advice is a little bit twofold, right? Don't forget the importance of journalism and why we're there, and don't let police dictate your coverage of police conduct at protests. And we have a crucial role to play in democracy, right? I mean, if there are no journalists, where are the checks and balances? Where is that accountability? We're part of documenting history as well. And I think that's extremely crucial to remember. But also the second part of that advice is it's okay if you're not comfortable in these settings. It doesn't make you a less than journalist. I think that every journalist needs to have a risk assessment where they're seriously considering their safety, what they're willing to do, what they're not willing to do. And I think that's fine. Every journalist has different boundaries, and I think that's okay. It does not make you a terrible journalist if you're putting your safety first. So.
And I see Julie's question, but are you, and we'll get to that. But do you anticipate any further action post-trial against DMPD or anything like that later on?
I don't know. I know that we had asked for an internal investigation, but we also had asked for an internal investigation into the pepper spraying of our journalists. In the days following my own arrest, actually the next day, and it was the same journalist that was with me actually. And when I was arrested, and I don't see that going anywhere. I mean, that's been months.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
For sure. Then Julie's asking, during your trial, did anything happen that was unexpected?
Again, I thought it was just extremely ironic that they were using local TV footage to try to say that another journalist on the scene was there unlawfully. It's not like they don't know me. I've talked to the Polk County Attorney's Office and obviously DMPD many times before, so they're very aware that I'm a journalist. So I think that was always surprising. And also it was surprising to hear my arresting officer talk about what I allegedly interfered with, because I was also charged with interference with official acts, and I didn't know what I did to get that charge until trial. Yeah. And he says that I had moved my arm. Mm-hmm. And then he admitted that, she might have moved her arm because she was just pepper sprayed in the face. So that was very surprising. Really, it was just frustrating to hear lies being told. And, for instance, again, the arresting officer said I wasn't leaving the scene, which video literally shows me leaving and I was charged at, stuff like that. Like I had to be arrested because I refused to leave. I mean, I don't know. It was just pretty ridiculous. And as well, the Polk County assistant attorney that was, prosecuting me, he had tried to claim that I was specifically going towards violent protesters. It was just it almost felt very desperate, but again, there was really little evidence that against me. So yeah.
And how did it work with the Register supplying your legal team? And is that something that you asked for, or was it just?
No, it was immediate, and it was actually not technically. I mean, yes, the Register, but it was the parent company, Gannett, is what I think funded the legal team. And honestly, that evening they had hired someone. Literally that evening, I remember the lawyer. I didn't know him at the time. He picked me up from jail, and I feel really bad because I love him now. He's awesome. I obviously know him, and I'm super grateful for him. But he came to pick me up from jail. And I was like, I don't know you. Sorry, I don't really feel comfortable getting in a car, but then my editors were actually already on their way anyway as well. So
editors
what?
Oh, which editors picked you up?
Yeah, Rachel and Paige. Paige is no longer at the Register, but Rachel and Paige. And we were listening to music and reminiscing on me being arrested. It was just great.
For sure. And recently you're transitioning into a new role, right? Social justice right now. So how post trial and post everything like that, how are you gonna approach this beat? for the future, I guess, if that makes sense.
In similar ways that I approached the beat, the breaking news public safety beat, I think highlighting diverse voices and actually being present in the communities is extremely important. And that's what I've done since, the beginning of my time at the Register. That's how you build trust. That's how you mend community and media relations when, someone knows actual journalist in their community that actually tells their stories as well. And puts time and effort into them. And I will continue to do that. But in this role, I'll be able to, focus all my coverage and my time and my energy into that. And so I'm really excited for that opportunity.
Sure. And what are some of the stories you've done that really stand out?
Well, actually, I had a story published today that if you guys want to read it and subscribe to the Register, but it was actually that one that I've been working on with months with the Midwest Plains region criminal justice reporter about an inmate an incarcerated Iowan suicide, days after he contracted COVID. And that's really important for me because that story I felt very important to tell because the family has not been given any investigative reports into their own son's death. And they're really grieving and they're really hurting that they don't have these answers. And so I was very honored to, tell not only their son's Christopher Rios, that's his name, not only his story, but, their fight for answers as well. And that's kind of that kind of exemplifies the work that I hope to continue and, will do as a social justice reporter, getting into criminal justice as well, and, holding people accountable.
For sure. Well, those were all the questions I had. I don't know if there's any more in the chat or anything like that, but do you have any final thoughts or anything else that you want to add that we didn't talk about, I guess?
I think we covered a lot. I think we covered a lot of ground. Again, I think journalism is in a scary state in the sense where there are real and direct threats against us, and it's scary, but please just don't remember the role that we play in preserving democracy and the freedoms that, people are fighting for. So.
And one last question. What suggestions do you have to build better relationships, either with the police and with other journalists or just sources, people in the community in general?
I'll start with the people in the community and other journalists. I mean, at least at the Register, I don't have bad relationships with other journalists. I mean, we're very collaborative and we want to see each other grow and really just benefit the community. I mean, better journalism means a more informed community, which means the community has more power, right?
For sure.
And I think that that's always a good thing. I do think that journalists should hold other media more accountable. How we do that, I'm still fairly new to journalism as well, so I'm asking myself these questions. How to have better relations with community. It's kind of what I was saying, actually being present in the communities for good things, for bad things, making your face shown in the sense where someone actually knows a journalist in their community that's willing to listen to them and that cares, because at the end of the day, I'm part of the community too, right? I mean, I live in Des Moines. We're all here, we're all together. And I think showing that to your fellow community members says a lot and builds a lot of trust. And that's personally how I've been able to build a lot of trust in Des Moines. Suggestions for better relations with police. I mean, like I said, I have remained professional.
Yeah.
I don't really have an answer to that. I really don't have an answer to that.
Understandable. Okay, so there's a question for me, but there's also a question from the audience for you. So the audience is wondering, what's the name of the privacy service that you mentioned earlier?
Yes, it's Delete Me. And I think the website is joindeleteme.com or .org, or it's joined. So if you Google Delete Me and then the one that says Join Delete Me is, that's the one that I used.
And then the question Julie has for me is, what have you learned from having Andrea as a mentor? And it's so much, just a lot. But I think the biggest thing that stuck with me that Andrea taught was just to be a human. Like, you're a journalist, but you're also a human, and it's okay to like tell people like, hey, I'm sorry about what happened, because I think in breaking news, we cover a lot of death and a lot of sad things, and I've definitely come to call to Andrea so many times, been like, dude, I don't know how to like approach this, and she's always just been like, it's okay to just say like, I'm sorry, like, it's sad, and just tell them that, and be human and say like, I'm sorry this happened, and just be honest and just say, this is what I'm looking for. So yeah, I don't know if that helps, but yeah, Andrea's a great mentor. So
Thanks.
yeah,
Amber is a great journalist. You have a
thank you.
very smart, bright future. But yeah, just echoing what Amber said, I think that's kind of what I was talking about with, community relations, is that it's okay to be human. Obviously keep a professional boundary, but I mean, don't be insensitive. If someone's, you don't have to be so like rock stone in my opinion. As long as, again, you're kind of maintaining that boundary and not letting necessarily personal opinions getting into your coverage, right? So
For sure. And a couple comments is from David Bola. I'm so sorry if I pronounce your last name wrong. I'm so sorry. But they say, thank you, Andrea. Good luck, and keep on being the active ambassador for the press and freedom. And I will echo that. Thank you for so much for doing like what you do, and consistently putting out like phenomenal quality of like your work in journalism, and just being active, being present, and making sure that the voices of the community, especially within marginalized community, is heard. So
Yes, let me jump in here and say thank you to both of you. Amber, thank you so much for leading us through this conversation. We really learned a lot. And Andrea, thank you for your service, for being here for today, for really standing as an icon for journalism. Your words about the importance of what journalists do, I think, will stay with many of us and matter so much. So thank you on behalf of the First Amendment Committee and on behalf of the audience watching. We really do appreciate you sharing your story. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy these discussions, and you feel free to share my email with some students if they have any questions. I'm happy to help how I can. So
Thank you.
right.
Thank you.
thanks.
We're not streaming anymore, so I hope.